Welcome to Sleepy Historian, where old tales whisper by candlelight and memories gently drift into dreams. Tonight, let us journey back to a time long asleep in history.
Take a moment to find a comfortable position, to let your body sink into stillness and to slow your breath. Tonight, we will wander together into a world both familiar in legend and yet often misunderstood in reality, the world of the samurai. When you hear the word samurai, perhaps you imagine a noble warrior, dressed in shining armor, with an elegant sword at his side, walking through the quiet mist of a Japanese morning. Perhaps you picture fierce loyalty, skillful duels, and lives guided by the unshakable code of honor we know as Bushido. But beneath these enduring images, the daily reality was often far less romantic. Life as a samurai could be repetitive, restrictive, and filled with quiet struggles that history rarely paints in bright colors. There were the endless demands of duty, the meager stipends that barely sustained families, and the weight of honor that pressed down on every choice they made. Tonight, we will explore this world gently, with care. We will move slowly through 4 stories, 4 lenses onto samurai life. First, the long days and quiet frustrations of the low-ranking samurai. Then we will walk alongside one of the most famous swordsmen in Japanese history, Miyamoto Musashi. Later, we will uncover the mystery of the 47 ronin, men bound by loyalty and revenge. And finally, we will step inside the stone walls of a daimyo's castle to glimpse the elegance and rigid order of samurai elites. So, let us begin with the quiet struggles of those at the bottom of the hierarchy. Imagine yourself as one of them, a low-ranking samurai, waiting through long days, watching the seasons pass, bound by duty and tradition. Picture the early morning in a small provincial town of 17th century Japan. The air is cool, and the faint scent of pine drifts down from the wooded hills. In a modest wooden house, a samurai stirs awake. He is no great lord, no wealthy retainer. He is among the many one of the low-ranking samurai whose lives were bound less to battle and more to bureaucracy. His stipend, the payment from his lord, is meager. Perhaps he receives it not in coins, but in rice, measured carefully and recorded in ledgers. This rice must sustain his household for the year, his wife, his children, and perhaps elderly parents as well. And yet, it is never enough. He may secretly sell some of his rice to a merchant, exchanging it for firewood, oil, or cloth. This transaction is simple, but even it carries the faint scent of dishonor. For the samurai was meant to live above commerce, untainted by trade. You might imagine that being a warrior meant days filled with sword practice, or the thrill of battle. But for the low-ranking samurai, it often meant waiting. Endless waiting. He might spend long hours in the service of his daimyo, standing silently in a corridor, waiting for orders that never come. Or he might sit in a sparsely furnished room, brush in hand, copying documents, writing reports, attending to the quiet machinery of administration. This was life for many samurai during the long peace of the Tokugawa era. With great wars long behind them, their swords often rested untouched at their sides. The code of honor demanded readiness, yet the world gave them little opportunity to act. Imagine the tension of that, carrying weapons every day, yet rarely unsheathing them. Living with a reputation as a warrior, yet finding most of one's life consumed by waiting, by bowing, by routine. And always there was the honor code, a code that governed every action, every word, every silence. If insulted, even slightly, the samurai was bound to respond. To ignore such a slight was unthinkable, for it could stain his reputation and that of his family. And yet to respond might invite violence or punishment. Imagine walking through life, where even casual interactions carried the heavy weight of consequence. Then there was the matter of pride. Many low-ranking samurai lived close to poverty, yet they were forbidden from working in the ways common folk did. They could not farm. They could not sell goods in the market. To do so would be dishonorable, and so their wives and daughters often shouldered the hidden burden quietly weaving cloth, or even serving in merchant households, while the samurai maintained the facade of dignity. In the evenings, as lanterns flickered against paper walls, a samurai might sit and polish his sword, not because it had been bloodied in battle, but because it was the one symbol that remained the soul of his identity. He would draw the blade, examine its edge, and slide it back into its scabbard. The rhythm of this act was steady, almost meditative. And yet beneath it lay a question: what was the purpose of a warrior in a time without war? Some turned to scholarly pursuits. Poetry, calligraphy, and philosophy filled the hours that battle once claimed. Imagine a small room lined with scrolls, the quiet scratching of a brush on paper, as a samurai copied verses about the moon or transcribed lessons from Confucian classics. These moments were gentle, even soothing, but they were also a reminder of what was missing and of what their ancestors once were. For the young samurai, ambition burned quietly. He dreamed of rising, of being noticed by his lord, of earning a greater stipend. But advancement was slow, bound by family ties and political favor. And so, frustration simmered beneath the surface. A samurai might spend a lifetime waiting for an opportunity that never came, and always there was the shadow of dishonor. To fall into debt, to fail in duty, or to be disgraced could mean the unthinkable seppuku, ritual suicide demanded as atonement. Even the low-ranking samurai carried this burden, the knowledge that a single failure could erase his life and leave his family ruined. So, though we often imagine the samurai as living lives of glory, for many the truth was quieter, heavier. Endless waiting, endless duty, a code of honor that could not be escaped. Their lives were a delicate balance between dignity and poverty, between pride and frustration. Imagine the stillness of such days, repeating one after another. The sound of sandals against gravel as the samurai walked to his lord's residence. The creak of wooden floors beneath his feet as he bowed in silence. The scent of rice cooking stretched thin to feed a family. The distant toll of a temple bell at dusk, marking yet another day completed, without triumph, without disgrace. This was the rhythm of life for countless samurai warriors without war, guardians of a code that gave meaning, but also burden. Their lives were not filled with sword fights and glory. They were filled with quiet endurance. Now that we have glimpsed the quiet struggles of the low-ranking samurai, let us turn our attention to a figure who lived at the edges of their world. One who walked a path apart from lords and stipends, apart from the daily rhythms of bureaucratic duty. This is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the most famous swordsman of Japan. His name has become legendary, but his life was not one of splendor. Instead, it was a journey shaped by solitude, by ceaseless wandering, and by the endless search for mastery. Imagine him in your mind's eye. A tall figure for his time, broad-shouldered, carrying with him not one sword, but two. His kimono is plain, the fabric worn at the edges. His hair is untidy, less carefully arranged than other samurai might have kept it. He walks the dusty roads of Japan, sometimes alone, sometimes with a small group of followers, but always restless, always searching. Musashi was born in the late 16th century, a time when Japan was still unsettled, still shaped by wars between rival clans. His early years are shrouded in mystery, but tradition tells us that by the age of 13, he fought his first duel. Picture that moment, a boy scarcely more than a child, standing with a wooden sword in hand, facing an older warrior. The duel ends swiftly with the boy victorious. From then on, his path was set. As he grew, Musashi became known not for wealth, nor for service to a lord, but for his duels. Over 60 in his lifetime, if the legends are true. Some were fought with steel, others with wood. And in every case, Musashi emerged alive, his reputation deepening with each contest. Perhaps the most famous of these duels was with Sasaki Kajiro, another master swordsman whose blade was known as the drawing pole, a sword so long it was said to sweep through the air like the wings of a bird. The story tells that Musashi arrived late, keeping Kajiro waiting beneath the morning sun. Instead of a steel sword, he carried a wooden one, carved hastily from an oar during the journey by boat. The two men faced one another on a quiet shore. Imagine the waves lapping gently, the cries of seabirds overhead, and the stillness of that moment. The duel was swift. Musashi struck Kajiro with a single blow, ending the fight before it could truly begin. Some say it was a test of strategy, others of psychological mastery. But for Musashi, it was another step along his path of discipline and survival. Though remembered for his sword, Musashi's true legacy may be his philosophy. He was not only a warrior, but also a thinker, an artist, and a teacher. In his later years, he wrote a book, The Go-Rin no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings. Within it, he laid out his thoughts on combat, but also on life itself. He wrote of strategy as a way, a path. He taught that to know one thing deeply was to understand many things. That rhythm, timing, and perception mattered more than brute strength. And that mastery came from endless practice, from the refinement of one's spirit as much as one's blade. In the evenings, Musashi sketched and painted. His work still survives simple, powerful brushstrokes of birds, of landscapes, of quiet moments. In these images, we glimpse not the duelist, but the contemplative man behind the legend. The warrior who understood that the sword was but one path among many. And yet, his life was never one of comfort. He lived as a ronin, a masterless samurai. Without the steady income of a lord's favor, he wandered. He slept in small inns and roadside shelters, perhaps beneath the stars. His existence was precarious, but also free from the stifling hierarchies that bound so many others. In his final years, Musashi retreated to a cave called Rigando. There, surrounded by stone and silence, he wrote his reflections. Imagine the cool air of the cave, the sound of dripping water echoing against the walls, and a man sitting quietly by lamplight, brush in hand, distilling a lifetime of experience into words. When he passed from this world in 1645, Musashi left behind no dynasty, no castle, no great wealth. What he left was something less tangible, but perhaps more enduring, a philosophy of discipline, of resilience, and of seeing clearly the flow of life. And so when we think of samurai, it is worth remembering both the low-ranking retainers, bound to duty, and the lone swordsman who carried his life in his hands and walked a path apart. Together, they reveal the contrast within samurai life, the weight of structure, and the pull of freedom. From the solitary figure of Musashi, we now turn to a story not of one man, but of many. A story told and retold in Japan for centuries, whispered in tea houses, written into plays, and painted on scrolls. It is the story of the 47 ronin, a tale of loyalty, revenge, and the burdens of honor. The year was 1701. Japan was firmly in the Tokugawa era, a time of order, peace, and tightly woven hierarchy. Yet even in such a carefully balanced world, human tempers and personal pride could unravel everything. Imagine a grand castle in Edo, modern-day Tokyo. Its corridors lined with polished wood, the faint scent of incense drifting from distant rooms. Here, a lord named Asano Naganori came to serve in ceremony, a duty required by the shogun. In these halls, he clashed with another official, Kira Yoshinaka, a man said to be proud, quick to anger, and prone to slighting others. One day, insult boiled into action. Asano drew his sword within the shogun's palace, striking at Kira. The act was shocking, for to draw steel within such sacred walls was unthinkable. Asano's attack failed to kill, and for this breach, punishment was swift. He was ordered to take his own life, leaving behind his lands, his family, and his loyal retainers. Those retainers, now ronin, masterless samurai, faced a choice. Without a lord, they were expected to disperse, to fade into other duties, or sink into poverty. Yet a fire of loyalty burned within them. They could not forget their master's humiliation. And so, in secret, they began to plan. For nearly 2 years, they waited. Imagine that time, a group of samurai scattering, some taking up humble trades, disguising themselves as merchants or laborers, pretending to abandon their cause. All the while, they held their purpose close to the chest, whispering among themselves in hidden places. The patience required was immense. 2 winters passed, 2 summers. Their lives outwardly ordinary, inwardly bound to one single night. Then, on a snowy evening in 1703, they struck. Picture the scene: snowflakes falling thick upon the rooftops, lanterns glowing faintly in the dark. 47 men, gathering in silence, their breath clouding the night air. They carried their swords, but also ropes and ladders. Moving quietly through the streets of Edo, they descended upon Kira's mansion. In the confusion of that night, they overpowered his guards, one by one, moving room to room with measured precision. At last, they found Kira himself, hiding in a small shed within the estate. There, they ended the deed they had waited so long to perform. But even then, their story did not end. For these men knew that vengeance was not theirs to keep. They carried Kira's severed head not displayed in triumph, but in solemn duty to the grave of their fallen master, Asano. There, they laid it as an offering, fulfilling loyalty at last. And afterward, they surrendered themselves. There was no escape, no attempt to deny what they had done. The shogun faced a dilemma. The ronin had broken the law, but they had also upheld the highest ideals of samurai loyalty. In the end, they were ordered to die by their own hands, through ritual seppuku. Imagine that final act: 47 men, each one kneeling in turn, accepting death with the same calmness with which they had carried out their revenge. Their graves remain together still, in a temple in Tokyo where visitors light incense, honoring not their crime, but their loyalty. The story of the 47 ronin has lingered for centuries. It has been told in countless versions, some dramatic, others subdued. To some, it is a story of justice. To others, of tragedy. But always it raises the same quiet question: what is loyalty worth? To live without honor, or to die preserving it? Like the samurai polishing a blade in silence, the tale is both meditative and heavy. A reminder that behind the legends of samurai life lay choices without easy answers. Choices bound by duty, by pride, and by the quiet weight of tradition. We have walked through the quiet struggles of low-ranking samurai, followed the lone path of Musashi, and traced the haunting loyalty of the 47 ronin. Now, let us step inside the towering walls of a daimyo's castle, the center of power, luxury, and strict ceremony in the world of the samurai. Imagine yourself approaching such a castle in the 17th century. Stone walls rise before you, immense and unyielding, their surfaces mottled with moss. A moat glimmers below, reflecting the shifting clouds above. Across a wooden bridge, you pass through gates of heavy timber, reinforced with iron. Guards stand motionless, their armor gleaming, hands resting on the hilts of their swords. Inside, the castle grounds open wide courtyards, gardens, and winding paths connecting layers of walls and gates. Each layer is a barrier, each turn another test of loyalty and control. At the very heart stands the keep, a tall white tower with sweeping tiled roofs, its silhouette commanding the landscape for miles around. Within these walls, life was carefully ordered. The daimyo, the great lord, lived surrounded by retainers, advisors, guards, and attendants. Every movement, every gesture was shaped by ritual. Imagine the morning court when samurai lined the hall, waiting in silence for their lord to appear. They knelt upon tatami mats, their foreheads touching the floor in reverence, the air heavy with the faint scent of incense. For those who lived here, the castle was both home and prison. The daimyo's family occupied elegant chambers decorated with screens painted in gold and bright colors, tigers prowling, cranes in flight, pines bending in the wind. Yet beauty was tempered by rules. Women of the household were often secluded, their lives governed by rank and propriety. Even the simplest action, like walking across a corridor, was shaped by etiquette. Meals, too, reflected this balance of refinement and order. Imagine lacquered trays set carefully before each person, bowls of steaming rice, small dishes of pickled vegetables, fish grilled and seasoned with salt. The food was simple, yet presented with elegance. For the daimyo and high-ranking retainers, banquets were grander still arrangements of many courses, sake poured in measured ceremony, poetry recited between sips. Yet always there was formality, never ease. The castle was also a place of politics. Every gesture was a signal, every word a calculation. Allies and rivals alike gathered in these chambers, bowing, speaking softly, concealing intentions behind layers of courtesy. To thrive here required more than a sword. It required patience, memory, and the subtle art of intrigue. Beyond the audience halls lay the barracks of lower-ranking samurai. Here the atmosphere was less adorned, more austere. Rows of wooden rooms, sandals lying neatly outside, weapons resting by the walls. These men stood ready to guard, to patrol, to respond at any hour. Their lives were filled with waiting, with drills, and with the constant reminder that their duty was to serve. At night, when the lanterns burned low, the castle took on another mood. The corridors echoed faintly with footsteps. The gardens shimmered beneath the moonlight. Somewhere, a guard shifted his spear against the wall, listening to the wind rustling through pine branches. The daimyo might sleep in a guarded chamber, while courtiers whispered late into the night, weaving alliances in the shadows. And above all, the castle itself seemed to breathe. Its stones and timbers held the weight of countless lives, of triumphs, disappointments, loyalties, and betrayals. Within its walls, samurai life was at its most polished, its most demanding, and its most constrained. To walk through a daimyo's castle, even in imagination, is to feel the contrast of the samurai world, the elegance and the rigidity, the beauty and the tension. It was a place where the warrior code lived not only in battle, but in silence, in ceremony, and in the endless patterns of daily life. And so, we come to the end of our quiet walk through the world of the samurai. We began with the low-ranking retainers, men bound to duty and poverty, whose days were marked not by glory, but by endless waiting, silence, and restraint. From there, we followed Miyamoto Musashi, the lone swordsman, wandering roads and riverbanks, searching for mastery not only of the blade, but of the mind. Then we stepped into the long night of the 47 ronin, men whose loyalty carried them through years of secrecy and into history itself. Finally, we passed within the walls of a daimyo's castle, where life shimmered with elegance, but was bound tightly by ceremony, hierarchy, and intrigue. Each glimpse has shown us that the life of a samurai was not the simple legend we might imagine. It was not always shining armor, heroic duels, or tales of perfect honor. It was also waiting, longing, restraint, and quiet endurance. The sword was never only a weapon, it was a symbol, carried through lives that were as complex, as fragile, and as human as our own. Now, as you rest, you may imagine the stillness of that world, the faint scent of pine in the early morning air, the sound of sandals against gravel paths, the flicker of lanterns against paper walls. The rhythms of samurai life, once so heavy with duty, are now only echoes gentle, distant, and soft. Let those echoes fade. Allow yourself to sink into the calm of the present, where the burdens of honor and survival no longer press upon you. The struggles of the past belong to history, leaving only quiet reflections to lull the mind. Close your eyes if you have not already. let your breath deepen. Imagine the quiet gardens of a castle under the moonlight, the distant toll of a temple bell, the stillness of a sword resting undisturbed in its scabbard. And as you drift toward sleep, may you carry with you only the calm, the sense of balance, stillness, and quiet endurance that the samurai world has left behind.
Tonight's story comes to a close. If your eyes have gently shut, then I wish you a deep, peaceful sleep. Until we meet again in the next dream.